Good morning and welcome to Bible study for Wednesday, February 3rd. Today we are in Numbers chapter 20. So last week we covered the rebellion of the Israelites after they refused to go into the promised land when God told them to go. And then after God said, okay, now you're going to be stuck in the wilderness, they tried to go into the promised land. That failed. They went into the wilderness and then they grumbled against Moses and Aaron and they said, you guys are bad leaders. You didn't do what you were supposed to do. It's your fault, not ours. And after that grumbling and rebellion, there was a plague that affected 14,000 of the Israelites. And then after the plague, we had the reaffirmation that yes, Moses and Aaron are the rightful leaders of the tribes by the budding of the staff of Aaron. So now they are journeying farther back into the wilderness away from the promised land here in chapter 20. In the first month of the year, the whole community of Israel arrived in the wilderness of Zin and camped at Kadesh. While they were there, Miriam died and was buried. There was no water for the people to drink at the place, so they rebelled against Moses and Aaron. Again, we're not very far along before there's another rebellion. And rather than asking God for provision, which has always worked in the past, they rebel once again. Verse 3, the people blamed Moses and said, if only we had died in the Lord's presence with our brothers. So now they're saying, it would have been better for us to die of that plague or to be struck down for burning the unholy fire than to slowly die of thirst. Why have you brought all the congregation of the Lord's people into this wilderness to die along with all our livestock? Why did you make us leave Egypt and bring us here to this terrible place? This land has no grain, no figs, no grapes, no pomegranates, and no water to drink. They are unhappy, they're thirsty, they're tired, and they're grumpy, and they're saying, this place is worthless. Why would you bring us here? So what happens next? Moses and Aaron turn away from the people and went to the entrance of the tabernacle, where they fell face down on the Lord. Then the glorious presence of the Lord appeared to them, and the Lord said to Moses, you and Aaron must take this staff and assemble the entire community. As the people watch, speak to the rock over there. And I have this speak outlined in a little box because this speaking is going to be important here in a minute. And it will pour out its water. You will provide enough water from the rock to satisfy the whole community and their livestock. So Moses did as he was told. He took the staff from the place where it was kept before the Lord. Then he and Aaron summoned the people to come and gather at the rock. Listen, you rebels, he shouted. Must we bring you water from this rock? And again, I circled must we, because something happens here. Moses is feeling obstinate and prideful, and he takes credit for him doing the work rather than God. And so what happens? Then Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his staff, and water gushed out. So the entire community and their livestock drank their fill. So big things happen right here in this couple of verses. God tells Moses to speak to the rock and it will pour out the water. And Moses doesn't do that. Moses gets riled up in his own anger at the people and he strikes out. He doesn't hit the people, he hits the rock. And he's been disobedient. He didn't follow instructions. And by saying must we, he's also taking credit for the Lord's doing. But notice what God does. It's a good thing I'm not God. Because if this were me and my servant was disobedient and taking credit for my work, I probably wouldn't have allowed the water to pour out. I probably would have said, no water for you. God, however, is much more faithful, much more compassionate, and loving, and God shows grace and works through broken leaders who don't follow precisely as they ought, because ultimately the people still needed water and God wanted the people's needs to be met. So God meets the need, works through a broken human, and water pours out. But there's consequences for the leaders. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust me enough to demonstrate my holiness to the people of Israel, you will not lead them into the land I am giving them. So remember, before this point, when they had rebelled, God had said, all of you who rebelled will die in the wilderness, and then the next generation who is faithful will enter into the promised land. But Moses and Aaron were accepted from that. They were said, yeah, you guys were good. You tried to lead the people correctly. And so you will see the promised land. But now God is saying, even you are not going to lead the people into the promised land because you don't really trust me either. This place was known as the waters of Meribah, which means arguing, because the people of Israel argued with the Lord, and there he demonstrated his holiness among them. So Moses and Aaron are now on a journey through the wilderness that will end in death. They know that they're out here waiting for all of the rebels to die, and they are among them. And yet, they still lead. They are still called to be the people of God, even in the midst of the wilderness season. Verse 14, while Moses was at Kadesh, he sent ambassadors to the king of Edom with this message. This is what your relatives, the people of Israel, say. You know all the hardships we have been through. Our ancestors went down to Egypt, and we lived there a long time. And we and our ancestors were brutally mistreated by the Egyptians. But when we cried out to the Lord, he heard us and sent an angel who brought us out of Egypt. Now we are camped at Kadesh, a town on the border of your land. Please let us travel through your land. We will be careful not to go through your fields and vineyards. We won't even drink from your wells. We will stay on the king's road and never leave it until we have passed through your territory. So Moses is saying, we're just trying to get through. We won't take anything. We won't disturb you. We won't even use your water from your wells. Just let us pass with safety. Verse 18, but the king of Edom said, stay out of my land, or I will meet you with an army. The Israelites answered, we will stay on the main road. If our livestock drink your water, we will pay for it. Just let us pass through your country. That's all we ask. But the king of Edom replied, stay out. You may not pass through our land. With that, he mobilized his army and marched out against them with an imposing force. Because Edom refused to allow Israel to pass through their country, Israel was forced to turn around. You know, why would Edom do that? Why would the Edomites have conflict with the Israelites? Remember the two sons of Israel, who was first Jacob, the heel grabber, and he was grabbing the heel of Esau. This is a long feud that continued for generations. The Edomites are the descendants of Esau, and the Israelites are the descendants of Jacob. And they don't like each other. That's why Moses knew to send an emissary asking for permission, because he knew there might be conflict. And the king of the Edomites says, no, you guys aren't trustworthy. We remember what you did to our ancestor. You can't come here. So Israel is forced to turn around and go a long way around. Next, we have the death of Aaron, verse 22. The whole community of Israel left Kadesh and arrived at Mount Hor. There, on the border of the land of Edom, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "The time has come for Aaron to join his ancestors in death. He will not enter the land I am giving the people of Israel, because the two of you rebelled against my instructions concerning the water at Meribah. Now take Aaron and his son Eleazar up to Mount Hor. There you will remove Aaron's priestly garments and put them on Eleazar his son. Aaron will die there and join his ancestors." So Moses did as the Lord commanded. The three of them went up to Mount Hor together as the whole community watched. At the summit, Moses removed the priestly garments from Aaron and put them on Eleazar, Aaron's son. Then Aaron died there on top of the mountain, and Moses and Eleazar went back down. When people realized that Aaron died, all Israel mourned him for 30 days. So we see the first transmission of the priesthood of the high priest pass from Aaron to Eleazar. And this happens peacefully up on the mountaintop. Mountaintops are traditionally symbols of ascending towards God. And Jerusalem was the city on the hill, and you would climb up to go get nearer to God. And so this is a sacred moment and a sacred time. And so even though Aaron is presumably elderly, frail, and near death, they climb up together to have this sacred time with God. Chapter 21. The Canaanite king of Arad, who lived in the Negev, heard that the Israelites were approaching on the road through Atharim. So he attacked the Israelites and took some of them as prisoners. Then the people of Israel made this vow to the Lord: "If you will hand these people over to us, we will completely destroy all their towns." The Lord heard the Israelites' request and gave them victory over the Canaanites. The Israelites completely destroyed them and their towns. This place has been called Hormah ever since. Hormah is the word for destruction. So remember, when we are in Bible study, we talk about proscriptive and descriptive when it comes to God. Proscriptive is God proscribing or saying, this is how it's going to go and how it shall be. And descriptive is describing the events and what happened. And so a lot of the time when we have an event like this, where there's massive destruction and death, people associate that with God being proscriptive and saying God's mean, God hates people, God is a dealer in death. But let's look at this a little more carefully. We see the Canaanite king stirs up trouble. He decides, hey, let's take the people prisoner and captive and get some workers and some slaves for ourselves. This happens, and the people of God respond by asking God to give them justice, give them victory over their enemies, and the ability to regain their families. And by the way, we're going to destroy their towns as a symbol and a sign that people shouldn't mess with us because God is on our side. And God allows this to happen. And the Israelites are victorious. And one can look at it with sorrow that people had to die. But also one can look at it and see that God is just and favorable on the sides of mercy and equity. So what happens next? Well, we had a victory and we had a little time pass since the last rebellion. So do you think we're done yet? No. The people rebel again. Then the people of Israel set out from Mount Hor, taking the road to the Red Sea, to go around the land of Edom. But the people grew impatient with the long journey, and they began to speak against God and Moses. "Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die here in the wilderness?" they complained. "There's nothing to eat here and nothing to drink, and we hate this horrible manna." Again, This is 2 years now that they've been wandering around, and they're into their second year, and they are sick of it. They are over feeling displaced and homeless, and they are longing for normalcy. I'm sure we can all relate to that. Here, a year into this pandemic of COVID-19, we're pretty sick of masks. We are pretty sick of social distancing, and we long for normalcy. And some people are even willing to risk death or risk others' death to have that normalcy back, even though COVID is still a threat. The people, it's easy to look back in hindsight and say, oh man, those Israelites, how foolish of them, how silly. Why couldn't they just trust God and carry on faithfully? That surely this would end eventually. But yet we are still the same. Humanity hasn't changed much, although technology has changed a lot. And they are rebellious. The Lord hears of their rebellion. So the Lord sent poisonous snakes among the people, and many were bitten and died. Many scholars have looked at this and said God is manifesting the consequences of their actions and their words. God is showing that their words are poison to the community and that it inflicts great death to the unity of the community. And so God is manifesting their consequences in a way that they can see them and understand. Then the people came to Moses and cried out, "We have sinned by speaking against the Lord and against you. Pray that the Lord will take away the snakes." Again, they figured it out. Oh, there weren't snakes here before, and suddenly they're everywhere, and our people are dying. We've messed up. So Moses prayed for the people, and the Lord told him, "Make a replica of a poisonous snake and attach it to a pole. All who are bitten will live if they simply look at it." So Moses made a snake out of bronze and attached it to a pole. Then anyone who was bitten by the snake could look at the bronze snake and be healed. Many of you will have seen this symbol. It's still a symbol of doctors used today, the pole with the snake wrapped around it. It's a sign of healing, and we still use it to signify physicians. I love God's symbolism too. God takes an image of the very thing that was meant for their destruction and turns it into healing. This is not the last time God will do this. Many of us wear a cross without thinking of the shocking significance that God has taken an implement of death and destruction and turned it into a sign of new life, healing, and the resurrection. God is one who is continually undoing the inversion of the evil one. This world was meant for good and life and creativity and generation. The evil one has distorted that, and through our own sinfulness has created death, chaos, and destruction. But God continually inverts that and shows us the power God has to make things new. So the Israelites are healed and they continue on their journey. Verse 10. The Israelites traveled next to Oboth and camped there. Then they went on to Abarim in the wilderness on the eastern border of Moab. From there they traveled to the valley of Zered Brook and set up camp. Then they moved out and camped on the far side of the Arnon River in the wilderness adjacent to the territory of the Amorites. The Arnon is the boundary between the Moabites and the Amorites. For this reason, the book of the Wars of the Lord speaks of the town of Waheb in the area of Suppah and the ravines of the Arnon River, and the ravines that extend as far as the settlement of the Ar on the border of Moab. We do not have this book extant to history. We've not found any copies of it, but the Bible references it, and it was presumably around at the time of the writing of Numbers and would have been known, which is why it's spoken of here. From there, the Israelites traveled to Beer, which is the well where the Lord said to Moses, "Assemble the people, and I will give them water." There the Israelites sang this song, "Spring up, O well, yes, sing its praises. Sing of this well which princes dug and which great leaders hollowed out with their scepters and staffs." Then the Israelites left the wilderness and proceeded on through Matana, Nahaliel, and Bamoth. After that, they went to the valley in Moab where Pisgah Peak overlooks the wasteland. The Israelites then sent ambassadors to King Sihon of the Amorites with this message: "Let us travel through your land. We will be careful not to go through your fields and vineyards. We won't even drink water from your wells. We will stay on the king's road until we have passed through your territory." But King Sihon refused to let them cross his territory. Instead, he mobilized his entire army and attacked Israel in the wilderness, engaging them in battle at Jahaz. But the Israelites slaughtered them with their swords and occupied their land from the Arnon River to the Jabbok River. They went only as far as the Ammonite border because the boundary of the Ammonites was fortified. So Israel captured all the towns of the Amorites and settled in them, including the city of Heshbon and its surrounding villages. Heshbon had been the capital of King Sihon of the Amorites. He had defeated a former Moabite king and seized all his land as far as the Arnon River. So again, God is with the Israelites in their defense. They were attacked, and then they were able to wield off that attack and capture the land of their attackers. We see God is preparing the Israelites for battle. Their first time through the wilderness, they passed around all of these towns in peace, and they made it all the way to the promised land. And then when they got there and God said, "Get ready to fight," they said, "No, we're going to get killed, slaughtered. We don't know what's going to happen if we go in there. We don't want that." And so now, as they're traveling through the wilderness again, God is allowing them to meet with conflict to prepare them for the battles ahead. When we face trials and challenges in life, we sometimes resent God and say, "God, how could you let this happen?" Because God allows it for our good and our growth. Because God knows if we never face trial or hardship, we will be completely unprepared to do the work He's given us to do. So, here they have hardship and trial, but they're victorious. "Come to Heshbon and let it be rebuilt. Let the city of Sihon be restored. A fire flamed forth from Heshbon, a blaze from the city of Sihon. It burned the city of Ar and Moab. It destroyed the rulers of the Arnon heights. What sorrow awaits you, O people of Moab? You are finished, O worshippers of Chemosh. Chemosh has left his sons as refugees, his daughters as captives of Sihon, the Amorite king. We have utterly destroyed them from Heshbon to Dibon. We have completely wiped them out as far away as Nopah and Medeba." So the people of Israel occupied the territory of the Amorites. After Moses sent men to explore the Jazer area, they captured all the towns in the region and drove out the Amorites who lived there. Then they turned and marched up the road to Bashan. But King Og of Bashan and all his people attacked them at Edrei. The Lord said to Moses, "Do not be afraid of him, for I have handed him over to you, along with all his people and his land. Do the same to him as you did to King Sihon of the Amorites, who ruled in Heshbon." And Israel killed King Og, his sons. Yes?
I'm ready for lunch.
Okay, go back to my office and I'm going to help you in just a few minutes, okay, when Bible study's over. So you can have playtime first and then I will help you. Sorry. So they're told to kill King Og, not to worry about it. And Israel killed King Og, his sons, and all his subjects. Not a single survivor remained. Then Israel occupied their land. Again, we tend not to like this portion of the Bible, the idea that there is conflict and people die. Innocent people die. Because again, King Og, yeah, he wasn't a very good king, and his sons would have continued to cause warfare and strife and struggle because kingship passed from son to son. So it would have been their duty as sons of Og to continue the fight for this land. But all the subjects dying, that doesn't sit well. I don't think it should sit well with us. And we as people of God need to look at this history and not uplift it as a sacred, holy, loving, wonderful thing that happened, but to say how sad and how terrible, as we as human beings cannot figure out how to live together in peace with the Lord. Lots of people have said major justifications for why the Canaanites deserved to die. They were unholy people. They were people who worshipped false gods, and they were people who sacrificed their children to idols. And that's true. As far as we know in history, they were people who did detestable practices. But for me, I'm still sad that there wasn't a way to redeem and reform them and bring them in peace to live with the Israelites. I'm not God. I don't know exactly why this happened or needed to happen. God does. It's one of those questions I have for God when I get to ask my questions is, what's the deal with war? And why is this so prevalent? Chapter 22. Then the people of Israel traveled to the plains of Moab and camped east of the Jordan River, across from Jericho. Balak, son of Zippor, the Moabite king, had seen everything the Israelites did to the Amorites. And when the people of Moab saw how many Israelites there were, they were terrified. The king of Moab said to the elders of Midian, "This mob will devour everything in sight like an ox devours grass in the field." So Balak, king of Moab, sent messengers to call Balaam, son of Beor, who was living in his native land of Pethor, near the Euphrates River. His message said, "Look, a vast horde of people has arrived from Egypt. They cover the face of the earth and are threatening me. Please come and curse these people for me, because they are too powerful for me. Then perhaps I will be able to conquer them and drive them from the land. I know that blessings fall on any people you bless, and curses fall on people you curse." Balak's messengers, who were elders of Moab and Midian, set out with the money to pay Balaam to place a curse upon Israel. They went to Balaam and delivered Balak's message to him. "Stay here overnight," Balaam said. "In the morning I will tell you whatever the Lord directs me to say." So the officials from Moab stayed there with Balaam. That night, God came to Balaam and asked him, "Who are these men visiting you?" Balaam said to God, "Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent me this message. Look, a vast horde of people has arrived from Egypt, and they cover the face of the earth. Come and curse these people for me. Then perhaps I will be able to stand up to them and drive them from the land." But God told Balaam, "Do not go with them. You are not to curse these people, for they have been blessed." The next morning, Balaam got up and told Balak's officials, "Go on home. The Lord will not let me go with you." So the Moabite officials returned to King Balak and reported, "Balaam refused to come with us." Then Balak tried again. This time he sent a larger number of even more distinguished officials than those he had sent the first time. They went to Balaam and delivered this message to him. "This is what Balak, son of Zippor, says. Please don't let anything stop you from coming to help me. I will pay you very well and do whatever you tell me. Just come and curse these people for me." But Balaam responded to Balak's messengers, "Even if Balak were to give me his palace filled with silver and gold, I would be powerless to do anything against the will of the Lord my God. But stay here one more night, and I will see if the Lord has anything else to say to me." That night, God came to Balaam and told him, "Since these men have come for you, go up and go with them, but do only what I tell you to do." So God says, okay, they're persistent. They're not going to leave you alone. Go ahead and go with them. But they've been warned that God will do what God will do. So the next morning, Balaam gets up, saddles his donkey, and started out with the Moabite officials. But God was angry that Balaam was going. Wait, what? God just said, Balaam, fine, go on ahead since these men have come for you. But now God's angry about it? Why would God be angry? Well, again, Balak has been persistent, but Balaam is being persistent back with God. You see, God said, don't go with you. Don't go with those people. Those Israelites that they're asking you to curse are people who have been blessed. So Balaam didn't need to go to sleep again to have the right answer to give these people. God allows Balaam his desire. You see, Balaam wanted the money. He said, let me sleep on it again and see if God changes his mind. God's angry that Balaam didn't listen the first time and seeks and asks again. So what happens? As Balaam and the two servants were riding along, Balaam's donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a sword drawn in his hand. The donkey bolted off the road into a field, but Balaam beat it and turned it back on the road. Then the angel of the Lord stood at a place where the road narrowed between two vineyard walls. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, it tried to squeeze by and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. So Balaam beat the donkey again. Then the angel of the Lord moved farther down the road and stood in a place too narrow for the donkey to get by at all. This time, when the donkey saw the angel, it laid down under Balaam. In a fit of rage, Balaam beat the animal with his staff. Sometimes we do this with people. We get so frustrated that they're disobeying us, or especially our tools, that we simply want to beat them into submission or pay them to do what they're supposed to do or just make them work. And we never ask, why does this happen? I don't know about you, but I've been frustrated for being delayed or leaving someplace, or the car won't start, something like that happens. And then later when I finally get going and I get along the way, there's a massive accident that could have been me, or I could have been involved in had I not been delayed. And every time I remember this portion of the Bible and I go, oh yeah, sometimes it's for our own good. The Lord then gives the donkey the ability to speak. I love this poetry here. The Lord essentially says, Balaam, you're being such an ass that the only way you'll listen to me is if your own ass starts speaking to you. What have I done to you that deserves your beating me 3 times? It asked Balaam. And Balaam is so angry that instead of going, oh no, my donkey is talking, just replies right back. You have made me look like a fool, Balaam shouted. If I had a sword with me, I would kill you. But I am the same donkey you have ridden all your life, the donkey answered. Have I ever done anything like this before? No, Balaam admitted. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the roadway with a sword drawn in his hand. Balaam bowed his head and fell face down on the ground before him. Why did you beat your donkey those 3 times? The angel of the Lord demanded. Look, I have come to block your way because you are stubbornly resisting me. 3 times the donkey saw me and shied away. Otherwise, I would certainly have killed you by now and spared the donkey. Then Balaam confessed to the angel of the Lord. I have sinned. I didn't realize you were standing in the road to block my way. I will return home if you are against my going. But the angel of the Lord told Balaam, go with these men, but say only what I tell you to say. So Balaam went on with Balak's officials. When King Balak heard that Balaam was on his way, he went out to meet him at a Moabite town on the Arnon River at the farthest border of the land. Didn't I send you an urgent invitation? Why didn't you come right away? Balak asked Balaam. Didn't you believe me when I said I would reward you richly? Balaam replied, look, now I have come, but I have no power to say whatever I want. I will speak only the message that God puts in my mouth. Then Balaam accompanied Balak to Kiriath Huzoth, where the king sacrificed cattle and sheep. He sent portions of the meat to Balaam and the officials who were with him. The next morning, Balak took Balaam up to Bamoth Baal. From there, he could see some of the people of Israel spread out below them. We're going to pause there for today, and we will move into what happens next week. I'm going to take this off recording and give you guys a chance to answer any questions.